Hey, welcome back to Sunday Sermon with Ola. You are back again with me, and I have officially got into the number of episodes where you start forgetting how many episodes you've done, which is an achievement. Do you know how hard it is to keep a podcast going? When you get the energy to go at the beginning, yeah, okay, go buy the stuff, let's go. And then week after week, you have to go find that love again. Luckily, it's not too hard to do with this one because you guys have been awesome. I think last week's discussion was highly anticipated. That means a lot of good feedback. That means I'm hearing back from you. I'm not just speaking into the wilderness, and that's fantastic. Podcast is one step away from madness. Uh, you know, Literally, if you see somebody on the street and they're talking to themselves, they could be recording a podcast. Really, you don't actually know. So before you judge, when I'm not that far away from that man, I have enjoyed doing this process, and I keep saying that because, um, like I said, I think that's a big part of doing it. There's no point in doing podcasts where no one's enjoying it. That's just sufferhead, and I don't think anyone needs that suffering in their lives. Who would call me right in the middle of me recording my podcast? Who? Let me see who. It's Fumbi. Of course, it's Fumbi. Yo, Fumbi, if you're watching this, yeah, allow me. I'm recording right now. Okay, so um, as I was saying, thank you to everybody. Thank you to the Patreon subscribers. I think we've got a few more. I think I'm on 16 right now, which is fantastic. 16 of you decided you want to put your money where your mouth is. And, the fact that a few of you listened to last week's episode and you decided to jump on, I respect it. Thank you. I ask that you guys continue to respond to me. And if you really enjoy the podcast, share it. I think it opens up some good discussion topics. And I think it can provide somebody with some content that might provide something positive for them. You know, I was just at uh, my sister and brother-in-law's house, and I was watching uh, these compilation videos of love and hip hop pretty much all day, and it really made me think. That stuff's very popular, and I heard that someone on there was getting paid like 50K an episode, and they did like 82 episodes. And then you start to think about, like, why am I bothering to turn the camera on? Like, I'm not having that impact, not having that reach, not making that money. And then sometimes you just go, do you know what? Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's about doing something you believe in. So here I am, trying to be pure, at least in ideology, for as long as it takes to start making some real money, and then I'll forget all of that. You're gonna see the same drama on this podcast. I'm gonna jump on the podcast. You'll never guess who Nick Cannon is sleeping with. Once that money starts rolling in, I'm gonna sell out. I'm telling you ahead of time, so you don't judge me as much. Okay. Today's topic. Today doesn't really have a specific topic. Today is based on like three sets of conversations I've been having this week. And I think the running theme in all of them is something to do with like manhood and emotions, and manhood as it pertains to womanhood. And I just want to say from the jump, because this is always one of those topics people like to jump up and say, well, that's not me. Yeah, okay. You can't talk about this in terms of individuals. All right? We can only talk about the socialized ideologies or ideas about what a man and what a woman is. So, yeah, of course, there's going to be a man in here who's like, well, I actually don't blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. It doesn't change the point I'm trying to make, okay? And same for you, the sisters, as well. I know you're going to say, if I've got a general point wrong, then that's a great time to hit me on the Instagram discussion at 8 p.m. on the Sunday, as after the podcast drops, because that's when we discuss it on Instagram Live. But if it's just that you just want to say that your situation is different anecdotally, then as far as I'm concerned, that's just an interesting tidbit. That's not quite what we're going for here. So these are broad strokes. Okay, cool. Also, as you always know, a lot of it's going to be colored by my belief in scripture and in the word of God, and believing that God created us and has a plan for us. So of course, yeah, a lot of my thoughts are going to come from that angle. Just putting that up front. Okay, let's get into this discussion. So I had three discussions this week that I felt all kind of took me along a certain path of exploration. The first conversation I had was with a good friend of mine. His name's Nabil Abdul Rashid. I think I've mentioned him a couple of times on the podcast. And you might have seen him on Britain's Got Talent. He got the golden buzzer. But right now that's because of Corona. That's on hold. You might have seen him in many different things. You might have seen him in things that we've collaborated on, like Colonial Cousins and so on and so forth. Okay, so having a discussion with Nabil, he put out a tweet that said, "Could you trust a man who's never been in a fight before?" Now, I know in today's society exactly what that evokes, and it makes a lot of men feel like if they are not a certain hyper masculine, macho version of a man, they're not a man. That's not the intention here. The intention here is to look into some of the expectations about men. Now, one thing I started to discuss with him about this idea about men getting into fights is that we all do come into this same society. We get handed a set of rules, and yet some people are going to be like, "That's not me," and they don't do them. But on the whole, most of us kind of figure stuff out. But I do think that these things, even if they are social conventions, I don't think that automatically makes them wrong. I think sometimes there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I'm going to get deeper into that. But that's the first conversation I had. The second conversation I had was with a sister man. I'm going to pull up the message so that I, again, like I like to say, I don't want to misquote anybody. But shout out to Janice. I was talking to her this week. We were having a pretty good conversation. I think it was quite enlightening, so I am happy about that. Um, okay, so she basically sent me this message, and we'll get into that if my phone ever loads up. Also, my phone been failing me network wise. Oh my goodness, tried to put me to shame. Okay, so it was a tweet from a woman called Raifa Rafiq. That's her at. It says men can detach themselves from an emotional connection with anything they deem to love. A wife, a parent, a child they thought was theirs 2 hours ago. I'm actually scared of these people. All of them. And then she goes on to say, um, someone said before that men's relationship with their children is very dependent on their relationship with their mother. And boy, also fatherhood isn't just biology. Nurturing a relationship that you can just cut is wild and psycho to me. So we're gonna get into that one as well. I'm covering a lot of ground in this podcast, but I think I'm gonna pull out some themes that I think are helpful and run through all of them. The last is a conversation I had on Instagram Live with a sister I've come to respect very much. Her name is Bola Soul, and follow her on Instagram. She is a financial wellness coach, but she touches on quite a few different topics, and she's just all around, pretty cool. Um, so we jumped on an Instagram Live where my network was failing me for a lot of that discussion. I got the Teddy Riley set up, and we were discussing. Well, basically, she had shared a tweet that said that, as a black woman, you've done the strong black woman thing quite a few times. Now you're looking for some softness, and I'd replied to her that I think the brother's been craving it too. And so we got into a discussion because, at first of all, I meant it in terms of wanting sisters to have that space to be soft, but also I think in some senses men want some softness too for themselves. Okay, so those are the three. You're going to see how that comes together, hopefully, by the end. But the first point I want to address is, would you trust a man who's never been in a fight? I'm going to say to you that getting in a fight is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm dropping that there. I know how it's perceived in society. I know how we treat people who fight. They're naughty boys, blah, blah, blah. Violence is not the key, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to call absolute nonsense on that. We love violence. We love it. We watch movies about it. We listen to music about it. We like to see it. And the only thing is, it sounds easier, or it sounds better, and it's much easier to say, like, non-violent, non-violent. The truth of the matter is, a man breaks into your house with a gun, and you have the option of getting a gun, you're getting a gun, right? So at least in self-defense, most people will agree that some violence is necessary, or even indeed a good thing. So if, countries who keep talking about how everyone needs to be non-violent have built up their wealth through violence, I have to ask myself, well, what is this relationship with violence? I truly believe that there is a certain level of accountability and consequence that violence brings into the world. I know this is not an easy path to tread. I understand. I'm not so crazy. I'm not self-aware. I understand how it sounds. What I'm saying to you is that, like, somebody who's been banged in the face before has a certain level of wisdom you can't be taught. And I said this was some quotes for, and it just always sounds wild. But there's a certain level of consequence that some women just will never see because society's protected them from getting that bang in the face. And so why you can see some, that archetypal, stereotypical situation, a man and woman are together, and the man's trying to like calm it down because there's a guy who wants to be aggressive, and the woman's hyping up like, my man's gonna beat you up, blah blah blah. There's a certain level of consequence she's been protected from by knowing that the men are gonna do the fighting. The man who's trying to hype it down, it's not always because he's weak or he's scared or whatever it is. But when you've been banged in the face before, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about whether something was really worth it. You learn to assess opportunities, risks. You start doing SWOT analysis. You start looking at situations like a chess player. You start thinking, oh my goodness, if I do this, then this means this. Having that instant consequence, I think, is a form of wisdom. And I've had a few formative fights in my life. I'd say maybe two that stick in my mind all the time. There's one when I was in primary school. It wasn't much of a fight. His name is Anton Scipio. I still remember that name. And the guy said something. He was just antagonizing me or whatever as a child. And I punched him. I punched him in his face. His eye started bleeding. I'd never seen someone's eye fill up with blood like that. Later on, like for the rest of as long as I knew him, he had always had a red dot where the blood clotted on his eyeball. And, I got in trouble, obviously, at school. But I never felt good about it. I was like, yo, the guy got the better of me because he was talking crap, and eventually I lost it and punched him in the face. The second one, not so glamorous. This happened in Spain, actually. We were on a school trip. And basically it was me and a guy called Brian Kelleher. We're playing football. So basically our school, everyone who took Spanish took a homestay trip to Madrid. We go stay with a Spanish family and we go like see Spain for a week or so. So we met up all together and we all went to play football. As we're playing football, I just felt like my guy was hacking me like too much, trying to tackle me. So I now started intentionally hacking him. At one point, he just basically picks up the ball with keeps it under one arm, and the other arm he just uses to basically grab me by the neck and push me over. And we get into a scuffle, and basically he has the better of me. I get very emotional, very, very emotional. And I decide I'm leaving the pitch. I'm walking. I don't want to be around here anymore. I want to go. This is the statement I'm making. I'm stomping off. Where I was walking, though, was actually close to where the ball had rolled to. So on the way out, I tried to do a little back heel to give them back the ball, like a little FU, and slam the door. I'm going. In the process of doing this, I tripped over the ball. So I just got knocked to the floor, and then now I've slipped up again. And I just had to eat that. just walk all the way back to the Spanish family I was staying with, and just kind of like figure out my life. And I tell you what, I haven't had many fights since then, not physical fights. But I tell you what, the reason why I haven't is because those two situations taught me that whilst I'm not particularly 100% against violence in general, it's not a go-to. And the reason why a lot of people treat it as a go-to is usually because they can't fight. I submit to you that people who can really fight usually avoid fights because they know what they can do. They know the damage it does. And after, I gave that boy the blood clot, and this time I made an absolute fool of myself, and the shame was just ringing around me, I was like, there's got to be another way. But does that mean like violence is never the answer? I don't think so. But I think having gone through those two fights, I learned a lot. So, is that to say that a man is not a man because he's not been through a fight? No, but I would question some of the aspects of how he's lived his life. If he's never been in a fight, I'll be like, even if somebody, like, if you're playing a sport and somebody gets too close on you, you might even just want to shove them a little bit. It's natural, but then you have to work through it and learn the lessons. And I think a lot of us are being shielded from the idea of consequence because, no one wants to be the one to say, all right, guys, let's just have a fight. Let them fight. And of course, you could just train. You could go to like a martial arts class, self-defense class, or whatever it is. But to never been in a fight, I don't know. I took karate as a kid. I took like 3 lessons of Muay Thai. I ain't had the fitness for that. But like, I recognize that there's going to come a time where, yeah, it might need to resort to some violence. And I think usually when you hear women say it, I listen, I take it with a pinch of salt. I'm like, of course you're going to advocate for no violence because most of the time, everyone's shielding you from violence. Most of us that say these kind of things, we live in cities and we say, oh, we're going to call the police and blah, blah, blah. What do you think the police are going to do? If a man has a knife and he's wielding it around, what do you think they're going to do when they get there? Most of us don't have to go join the army or whatever it is. We don't have to be in those situations where you would need to fight. So we can't be the ones to condemn it. I don't think so. Anyway, the second conversation I had was around that thing about men detaching from emotions. And, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that there may be some emotional growth and healing and all sorts of things in terms of maturing in this area that a lot of men need to go through. I don't doubt that. But I also think it's rich for women to talk about men in that sense because you're judging from a position where you've never lived. Women have never been men. Men have never been women. I don't think either one has the right to fully comment on the other because all you can ever do is judge the other by your standards. And your standards are not the be-all and end-all. Trust me, women do not have the fix-all on life. Neither do men. Funnily enough, when we come together, we get pretty close. But the idea that you're going to judge a man by a woman's standard is pretty ridiculous. I always say this. I say men are the only ones who can become parents without knowing. She said fatherhood's not just biology. Yo, do you realize a man can become a parent and not know? Women have to know. Their body, changes. They go through hormonal changes. They actually do the actual giving birth process. There's all kinds of extra hormones that come afterwards to prepare them. Their breasts swell, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a whole thing. They get a whole induction course, final exam, and top-up tests consistently. A man literally fabricates his entire fatherhood from experience. And if he has no experience of the child or of fatherhood, he's got nothing to go on. So you cannot expect a father to have the same, I'm not saying the same amount. You can't expect him to have the same love as a mother. They're going to be different because they're based on the fact that we are different. Right? So if a man is not going to have the same love, a man's ability to detach is way deeper than us just being psychos. You have to realize this, right? A lot of what women say about men's emotions, I think, is highly misguided because it presupposes an entirely woman controlled world. Like when you speak about a man expressing his emotions, usually it's within the confines of what you deem to be acceptable. If men really started sharing how they feel, this world would fall apart today. Rule number one of being a man is that you have to protect women from your true emotions. Because no woman is ready for the fullness of your emotions. If you say to a man, I want you to express your emotions more, what you're saying is, I want you to express the emotions that fit within the context I would like you to share. Like, I want you to tell me how much you love me or how beautiful I am. But what if he wants to tell you that you don't look good today? What if he wants to tell you that today he really thought about murdering you? Just strangling you, just slowly, watching you die because of pure anger that he couldn't release any other way. Not that he did it, but he thought about it. Are you ready for that conversation? Are you going to be mature enough to handle that and say, well, that's your emotion. I'm glad you processed it because, emotions are terrible decision makers, but they're followers. So clearly something happened that made you feel that way. Would you like to explore it more? No, that's not what you're going to say. You're going to deem him a psycho. He's never going to tell you that he thought about killing you. A man is never going to tell you exact. Do you know how much you would struggle if he just expressed his sexual desires, true sexual desires, freely? Your world would fall apart. So every decent man goes through a whole process of hiding his true emotions so that you can live in a somewhat peaceful and manageable world. So you can continue the fallacy that you are the most beautiful woman in the world. So you can continue the fallacy that you're not that annoying. And we do it for men as well, let's not lie. I think deep down men know they're not your greatest lover or doesn't have the largest apparatus you've ever seen or whatever it is. But there are some lies we kind of uphold. But for a man, those are like facts. You kind of have to hide some facts from men. But these ones is you have to hide some real emotions from women. So a lot of it is actually to do with your own protection. I say, do you know what? Be careful with Pandora's box before you start telling men to say exactly what's on their mind. I say, check it. Be careful. You don't know what's going to come out. And don't pretend you're ready for it. Because every time you get a glimpse of something you don't like, see how you react. We watch it. We study it. And we learn very quickly that, look, if I love this woman, I can't show her everything. So, when men are easy to detach from things, it's because that's how society needs us to be. Think about male-dominated fields. Think about, there are, whilst we're trying to push for equality in the boardroom, we don't have equality on the battlefield. This is a highly male-dominated field. I don't see that many women really too worried about the fact that we don't have equal numbers dying for the country in the military. All right, so cool. That's an area where it's male-dominated. How do you think soldiers would work if they had deep emotional bonds and attachments? Every time one of your platoon members dies, you need 6 days alone in the dark, wearing black and eating ice cream. How are you going to fight a war like that? Okay, you're going to say, all right, fair enough. Not all of you are soldiers. What you're taking to extreme examples. But at the same time, if you say, for example, we're talking about, a situation where 2 parents lose a child. I'm not saying the man doesn't go through pain. But the woman is clearly going to need a rock. She's going to need somebody she can lean on at that moment. If the man is simply as emotionally entangled as you are, who's going to be the rock in that situation that you require your man to be often? Who's going to be that shoulder you cry on? Men carry a lot of emotional labor so that women can enjoy some emotional freedom. That's just how it works. We understand it. Most of us deal with it. And yes, every so often we want the room to enjoy some of that emotional freedom as well. But we know for the like the general in the general consensus of things, we are never going to share the exact same emotional space in a relationship. Never. It's emotional space in a relationship is like closet space. We've just come to accept you're going to need more space than us. It's just how we've done it. So if you are willing to say that men are psychopaths because they aren't as emotionally entangled in things, then you have to be ready for what happens when we do. What if we do become emotionally entangled? Think about somebody who's programmed or who's thought in everyday life that he needs to go and pursue you. If a man's not able to emotionally detach from you and you've, broken up with him, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to get these psycho dudes that keep chasing you and won't take no for an answer. And even when you say no, they'll take it as more of a challenge. A man needs to be able to emotionally detach quickly, because if he was to unleash the fullness of who he is, most women would not be okay. There's a lot of things us men need to work on. A lot of things. But I also say you can't really reprogram men from a woman's point of view. You can't. We can listen to each other. We can understand each other. We can speak to each other. But no woman has the blueprint for creating a perfect man. Neither does any man have the blueprint for creating a perfect woman. We have to understand that some experiences we're never really going to live with each other's. The last conversation I had was to do with the softness, and this was to do more with blackness. And it ties into some of the discussions we had about leaving the ghetto, and so on. But it's really just to do with the fact that men want women to be able to have a place to be soft and vulnerable. And it sounds like it because men are evil and they want to exploit that and use women and blah blah blah. But if you think, like, take all of that outside for a second, men really find a lot of purpose and value in protecting women. So when I started thinking about this more and more, I was like, I don't think I often know what it looks like when a black woman needs protecting. Because I've seen the narrative a lot. I see black women saying, "Oh, we're so unprotected," and so on. And most of the time I'm like, what do you mean? Like, at what point was I supposed to do something? Tell me. What was I supposed to do? It's very easy to just point a finger, just blame someone, and be like, "Oh, you didn't protect me." What was I supposed to do? I'm in the same situation as you. But put that aside. I started thinking deeper, and I was like, yo, I don't actually know what it looks like. Because I think there is a presupposition that black women have it under control. They'll be all right. Because of the tough exterior. All right? Because we've all had to go through stuff. And we don't actually have a context for ourselves outside of pain, oppression, struggle. So, I think whilst mainstream society was cheering black women on for being the strong, independent black women, you have to look at it like they were doubling down on white female fragility. And white women's need to be protected. And that's exactly what happens. When white women are in trouble or they cry or whatever, people feel the need to protect them. Because that's how they present themselves, as people in need of protection. Vulnerable, fragile, like a vase that, you want to make sure it doesn't fall off the shelf. Precious work of art. That's the idea. And I think there's an attachment between that and femininity. So as a man, a masculine, complementary opposite to that, there's a certain amount to which men are required to be tough. So that we can protect the delicate, right? I mean, we could talk about, a lot of the sort of progressive ideas about gentleness in men and so on. But I think that gentleness can't go in spite of being tough. Yeah. Anyway, I need to wrap up because it's been long. But I think the point to take away from here is that in all three of these situations, manhood is way more complicated than we give it credit for. Men can be simple, but manhood isn't. And every time we tweak formulas and we renegotiate social contracts, we have to acknowledge that we don't know the full extent of what we're doing yet. We don't know the impact it's going to have. And every time you tell men what you think they should be, you don't know exactly what you're going to get back. Then you're going to be like, no, I didn't mean it like that. I mean like this. What you mean is you don't actually know how to program a human being. None of us have the codes for that. So when I look at what God has created, I try and take some of my learning about what a man is from biblical terms, and I see Jesus who wept, and I see Jesus who overturned the tables in the temple and made, a whip to drive out the traders. I see both the lion and the lamb. There's a place for men to be gentle, soft, and emotional. And there's a place for men to be strong, tough, and use violence. And I think that's something for each man to ponder in terms of how does he find balance in this? And how does he find his own identity in this? And how do we build the kind of men that the sisters need and look for? Ones who are going to make them feel protected. I'll leave it there. Keep supporting this, please. If you enjoyed this conversation and you want to carry it on and give your thoughts, please join my Instagram live at olathecomedian at 8 p.m. tonight. Let's have a chat about it. I'm hoping you listen to this on the Sunday that it comes out. Because 8 p.m. tonight, we're going to have a chat. 8 p.m. London time, we're going to have a chat about it on my Instagram live. Please do sign up to the Patreon. I'd really like to get to 50 patrons, hopefully by the end of the year. And I'm on 16 right now. So, please, if you value what's being done here and everything I do in general, it's not just about the podcast, but all the little videos I put out and so on, please do share them and join the Patreon. Stay blessed.